Welcome to the Free Library of Philadelphia. My name is Andy Cahan, Director of Author Events. The sheer energy it takes to create his fiery fictional tours de force could burn down every writer's colony and MFA program across the country. His prose and plots have been compared to Chandler, Kane, and Hammett, but they forgot Walt Whitman. Like him, our guest is an American original. Some have said our greatest living crime novelist, and one of those some may have been the author himself. If so, it wasn't just ego, as the reviews, the awards, and the sales show. I've read the idea that novels always reflect the time and concerns of their writing. So we find ourselves here, and in 1942, when a mere anarchy is loosed upon the land, and the center cannot hold. And yet, tonight, he brings us this storm. A Wall Street Journal reviewer writes, with this breathtakingly complex historical police procedural, this storm, a torrential saga of violence, corruption, lust, radical politics, and greed, the author has created an ongoing Balzacian jigsaw puzzle that will surely attract, repel, outrage, and seduce readers for years to come. Please welcome back the demon dog of fiction, the one, the only James Ellroy.
Good evening, peepers, prowlers, pederast, pedants, panty sniffers, punks, and pimps. I am James Ellroy, the death dog with a hog log and the foul owl with a death growl. I am the author of 19 books, masterpieces all. They precede all my future masterpieces. My books will leave you reamed, steamed, and dry cleaned, tied, dyed, and swept to the side, screwed, blued, tattooed, and bafangooed. These are books for the whole fucking family. If the name of your family is the Manson family, if each and every one of you buy 1,000 copies of my new novel, This Storm Tonight, you'll be able to have unlimited sex with each and every person on this earth that you desire every night for the rest of your lives. If each and every one of you buy 2,000 copies of my new novel tonight, you will be able to have unlimited sex with each and every person on this earth that you desire every night for the rest of your lives and still get into heaven as the result of a special dispensation signed by me, the Reverend Ellroy. If each and every one of you buy 3,000 copies of this book tonight, you get to sex, you get to heaven, and for the first time in history, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, will rule the world. You heard it here first, off the record, on the QT, and very hush, hush. Now, cats and kittens, chicks and charlies, hear the drum roll, moving backwards 70-odd years to the tail end of 1941. It is the drum beat of history, and it is summoning you. Live radio broadcast, the Thunderbolt broadcast, Father Charles Coughlin, XERB Radio, Los Angeles, bootleg transmitter, Tijuana, Mexico, Tuesday, December 30th, 1941. Good evening and bienvenidos. A belated Feliz Navidad. And let's not forget Prospero Año y Felicidad, which means Happy New Year in English and serves to introduce the Mexico at War theme of tonight's broadcast. And at war we are, my fellow American listeners, even though we sure as shooting didn't want to be in the first place. But let's talk Turkey here. Es la verdad, as our Mex cousins say. We've been in this Jew-inspired boondoggle a mere 23 days, and we've been forced to stand with the rape-happy Russian Reds against the more sincerely simpatico Nazis. That's a shattering shame, but our Jew-pawn president, Franklin Double-Cross Rosenfeld, has deliriously decreed that we must fight der Fuhrer, so fight that heroic Jefe we regretfully must. It's a ways off, though, because we've got our hands full with the Japs right now. So let's meander down Mexico Way, where the senoritas sizzle and more hell-bent jefes hold sway. Mexico connotes proudly Catholic, does it not, friends? Add theocratic republic, anti-red, and dutifully religious to that. It paints a picture, doesn't it? Yes, but the picture is wholly inaccurate and sorrowfully seditious, dating back to the tempestuous 20s and the repugnant red reign of Presidente Plutarco Calles. Item. Calles instituted a 6-year plan for social and political reform patterned after Red Russia's 5-year plan. Item. Calles set out to eradicate the influence of the Catholic Church, barred religious festivals and processions, and created workers' collectives to counter the alleged excesses of industrial capitalism and further secularize the Mexican body politic, despite the stubborn opposition of the Catholic Mexican people. Item. Catholic bishops were forced to suspend public worship. Item. Calles' red shirt goon squads shuttered churches across Mexico. Item. Priests were murdered, nuns were raped, bishops sought South American asylum, and the Holy Mass was performed as a secret sacrament. Item. Cancerous Calles was succeeded by limp leftist Lazaro Cardenas. He was a motley mollycoddler of a less malicious sort. His anti-clerical policies bore a still Stalinist but less overt stink. Priests were still murdered, nuns were still raped, provincial despots still shuttered churches and satanically forbade Mass. Item. These practices continue under current Presidente Manuel Avila Camacho, a purported leftist centrist. Read that as one mealy-mouthed muchacho. Which brings us to the Cristeros, the rip-snorting, righteous Catholic counter-resistance. The gold shirts, not the red shirts of the Calles Cardenas communist ilk. The armed home guard that fought fire with fire, killed red shirts, lynched communist commissars and apoplectic apparatchiks, and burned more than a few red reptiles alive. The Cristeros flourished under Calles and were forced into hiding under Cardenas. In 1937, they majestically metamorphosed into the Union Nacional Sinarquista. Sinarchism means without anarchy. Synarchismo represents a full-fledged assault on the anti-Catholic left. Underground intermention now enforce Presidente Callas's atheistic agenda. The Synarchistas magnificently mount that Catholic counterattack. The Synarchistas are growing in number. They proselytize for a merged Catholic secular state. They've been called fascistas and Nazis, but that's all red hoo-ha. Yes, they surely grew out of the Spanish Falange and Generalissimo Francisco Franco's valiant victory in the Spanish Civil War. And now, with the United States embroiled in a consuming world conflict, and with Mexico situated at our southernmost tip, will the green shirt Synarchistas serve our best interests as the emergent world power, both anti-Axis and nationalistically non-red? Item: Mexico has remained neutral in this world conflict so far. Item: Presidente Camacho closed the German consulate in August of '41, but has let a great many pro-Axis Krauts and Japs linger down Mexico way. Enter Baja California. Baja's that lurid lick of land south of our own San Diego. It's a hellish hotbed of fascista, comunista intrigue. There's a great many resident Japs. The Mex State Police suspect the presence of a great many Jap submarine berths along Baja's Pacific coastline. There's talk of secret Jap air bases being ready for raids on U.S. naval installations and defense plants near Los Angeles. Enter Synarchista boss man Salvador Abascal. Señor Abascal es muy católico. He's the Synarchista spiritual and intellectual leader, and he wears Synarchista's green shirt proudly. Like most male adherents to Synarchismo, he wears a small SQ with a snake encircling it, tattooed in the web of his right forefinger and thumb. He's a handsome man of 31, and Presidente Camacho seems to fear him. Item: the Synarchista membership is growing in Mexico and the U.S. Item: punk patriarch Camacho has granted them land for an encampment at Magdalena Bay in southern Baja. Is he isolating the Synarchistas or readying them for some task? U.S. Army intelligence officers are now mobilizing in Baja. They will sort out the political gestalt and round up Japs in a replication of our own Jap internment efforts. What's the upshot here? Will Mexico end its neutered neutral stance and throw in with Uncle Sam? America is now alarmingly aligned with the repugnant Russian Reds and allied against the nifty but nefarious Nazis. Will the Mexican peso and the U.S. dollar plummet, and will a new gold standard arise? What about those ripe rumors, Nazis and Ruskies melting gold bars into swastika and hammer and sickle artifacts? Mexico, my American hermanos and Christian countrymen, it's the southern gateway to our cherished shores. Will waterlogged wetbacks breach our borders and sap us with sabotage? Will the Sinarquistas come to our aid as a heroic home guard? Yeah! I put a spell on you. You ain't nobody's audience but mine. 3,000 books per person. Think of what you get if you go along with the program. Let's flash back to the early winter. The month was February of 2008. I was living in L.A., my smog-bound fatherland, the fount of my dubious genius. I was looking out the southernmost window of my lonely divorce pad at the Ravenswood apartment house on the edge of Hollywood. I was wondering why I didn't have a girlfriend. I was recently divorced. I was number one on the watch list of Alimony International. And a synaptic flash hit me with unparalleled force. Here's what I saw. I saw forlorn-looking Japanese sitting in the back, shackled, of a U.S. Army transport vehicle, headed up a lonely, snowbound mountain road toward the Manzanar internment camp in the winter of 1942. All of a sudden, it came to me. The Second L.A. Quartet. I would take characters from the original L.A. Quartet, 4 novels, The Black Dahlia, The Big Nowhere, L.A. Confidential, and White Jazz, set in Los Angeles between 1946 and 1958, and the Underworld USA trilogy, 4 big novels on an international scale, set between 1958 and 1972. American Tabloid, The Cold 6000, and Bloods Are Over. I would take these real life and fictional characters and place them in Los Angeles during World War II as significantly younger people. The first novel would be called Perfidia. The viewpoints would be the illustrious real-life policeman in Los Angeles, William H. Parker, Kay Lake, the heroine of my much earlier written but latter set novel, The Black Dahlia, Dudley Smith, the overarching villain of the L.A. Quartet, and a Japanese-American forensic chemist in the deepest of personal and historical shit in early wartime L.A., Hideo Ishida. The book, Perfidia, was published to tumultuous acclaim and international bestseller status in the fall of 14. And now, the immediate follow-up, which takes us from New Year's 1941 into 1942, into the spring of 1942, and my greatest novel yet, until I eclipse it with the 3rd volume of the Second L.A. Quartet, which I'm working on now. I live history. I breathe history. It's not 2019. I pay no attention to what some people have called a current tumultuous political climate. Before you even think of asking me questions about this, let me tell you that I deny the existence of American history after May of 1942. Don't ask me any questions about America today, and do not utter that tired old saw, dig it. You've all heard it before. Just please don't say it tonight. Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. No, it's 1942. There's no rock and roll. There's no UFOs. Donald Trump hasn't been born. Moreover, yours truly hasn't even been born. The president is Franklin D. Roosevelt. Father Coughlin sure as shit doesn't like him. Let me tell you why. Father Coughlin was a real guy. He was a race baiter and a nativist huckster, and he did refer to FDR routinely as Franklin Double-Cross Roosevelt. He was a big America Firster, big nativist, big isolationist. You can make a big case for him to being a homegrown, rabble-rousing, fascist motherfucker. And Pope Pius and FDR got together, and they had simpatico agendas. Pope Pius wanted to put the quash on Father Charles Coughlin, and FDR wanted to secure more of the Catholic vote for the upcoming 1940 election. A deal went down. I don't know what was said between the two men, but it put the quietus on Father Coughlin in America, and Chargin' Charlie took his act south to XERB radio, which had 500,000 watts. They broadcast from Baja to Bangladesh. They became famous, XERB did, in the 50s and 60s for broadcasting the oldie shows of Ow! Noted rock and roller and disc jockey Wolfman Jack. Hence the drum roll of history in my new novel. And by the way, everything that I told you is true. Everything that Charging Charlie cited in this inflammatory prologue actually happened. Callas, the commies, Lazaro Cardenas, the left-leaning commies, all of it. The Synarchistas, Salvia Abascal, all of it, the Rapanuns, the neutered Catholic Church in once proudly Catholic Mexico, the fascist reaction to the commies and their repugnant red reign in Mexico. Now you know, because I've told you this, and you're all going to buy 3,000 copies of my books. Yeah. You can give them away as gifts. You can donate them to your public library. You can hoard them because they will ascend in value after my inevitable and regrettable death. This is my best book. It's my widest, farthest-reaching geopolitically. Close to half of the book takes place in Baja California. And I also loosened the constraints of my admittedly sometimes constricting staccato short sentence style in order to give you intimate access to my protagonists, who are the wildest and most diverse bunch of mofos that I have ever written in one book. On that note, let me read you a little bit of chapter 3. Chapter 3, John Conville, San Diego, 12:15 a.m., 1/1/42. Should old acquaintance be forgot, and days of old lang syne? Yells and hoots, noisemakers shriek, shouted toasts And remember Pearl Harbor. Revelers crammed up the sky room. You've got Navy brass on a toot. There's grabbing and groping. There's full-length necking on the dance floor. Stan Kenton presents artistry and rhythm. The Misty June Christie purrs select vocals. The sky room was glass-walled and umpteen floors high. You got wide views of battle-dressed beachfront. You got storm clouds and the world's darkest sky. Joan dodged gropes. She clutched her purse and made for the door. She was half-gassed. L.A. was 3 hours north. Army checkpoints would stall traffic. The shoreline blackout would drop shroud-like. She dodged last-ditch gropes and escaped. She made the elevator and pushed one. Mirrored walls hemmed her in. They were too good to pass up. She winked. She whistled. She was too proud to falter and too tall and good-looking to lose. Her red hair, her green eyes, her bold 6-foot sway, her trim winter uniform, gold buttons and braid. Lieutenant Junior Grade J.W. Conville, USNR. You shitbird Japs better watch out.
Do you ever go back and reread your other novels, your older novels?
I have reread in order to impart verisimilitude to the Second L.A. Quartet, the original L.A. Quartet, and the Underworld USA trilogy. I wrote down birth dates of the main characters, the people that I wanted to co-opt for the new series of books, the ranks of the various police officers, and other pertinent facts to refresh my memory. Beyond that, it's futile. The books stand. I get better and better. That's all I can humanly do, or superhumanly do, in my case.
What role, if any, did you play in making the movie L.A. Confidential, and how faithful to your vision is the movie?
Money is the gift that no one ever returns. And if it's movie money, the size, often large, always fits, and the color, green, often flatters. I was not consulted in any way. I think the movie's about as deep as a tortilla. I dislike most of the star performances, and it's a very lightweight recitation of my great book. I should also add that the very much praised L.A. Confidential sold only 1/50th as many books in 22 years as the execrably praised The Black Dahlia sold in 7 weeks. And it all comes down to the financial equation, and any writer who options a book to a movie studio or a producer should say, holy shit, look, they just gave me some money for nothing because I already wrote the book. Then they make it, they screw it up past redemption. Well, there you go. I'm nothing but happy with the movie. I just happen not to think very much of it.
I'm very much interested in the character Fred Otash. I did some research on him for actually a book I wrote about Bobby Kennedy's war on Jimmy Hoffa. And I didn't learn until, so Jack Vincennes, the character that seemed to me to be based on Otash, but you didn't meet Fred Otash until after publication of L.A. Confidential. So but it was, Vincenzo had so much of Otash in him. I'm wondering, was there any inspiration there, or was it just, how did that match up?
You're right about most of this. L.A. Confidential, the novel, was published in June of '90, and I met Fred Otash in person in '89. He was living at the Jockey Club in Biscayne Bay in Miami, and I went down to see if I could co-opt him because I'd been hearing about him for years. And you're right, he was the inspiration for the Jack Vincennes character in L.A. Confidential, the novel, the fellow who verifies stories for a confidential magazine, although I call it Hush Hush. And I had intended to use Fred Otash as the hero of my forthcoming novel, American Tabloid, in the role that was ultimately filled by the fictional character of Pete Bondurant. But Freddie, who was, God bless him and rest in peace, he crapped out of a heart attack in the fall of '92. He was having a heart attack, and instead of calling an ambulance, he called a cab. And the cab was delayed in traffic on the scintillating Sunset Strip. Fred Otash, R.I.P. And you know from the research you've done, Freddie left us that particular fall. Freddie got some bread out of me, and I realized, this guy's going to screw me. He's not going to keep his mouth shut. He will not fulfill the clause in the contract wherein I forbid him to go on TV shows and contradict the text of my fictional work. Because Freddie was making a lot of dough, exaggerating his part in the Robert Kennedy Hoffa Wars and the Marilyn Monroe job and the general social criminal history of L.A. in the early 1960s. So what was he going to do? Just make good and settle for the measly 10 G's that I was waving in front of him? So I cut Freddie loose. And then the fucker crapped out before I wrote American Tabloid, and I could have used him, but I was way off in Pete Bondurant land already. Yes.
Around that time that he died, that's Oliver Stone comes out with JFK, freaks Congress out, and then they decide to pass a law saying all the Kennedy assassination materials will be made available. And they subsequently did. And the Otash stuff, contemporaneous, none of that stuff that you said about Marilyn Monroe and tapes and all that stuff is in there. But it is very much, it resonates so much with L.A. Confidential. And I don't know, you couldn't have seen that stuff, those actual FBI reports, before you wrote the novel, or had you been able to get access to some of those? Because your imagination matches what he was telling the FBI and others were telling the FBI about him in 1960, 1961.
Absolute historical accuracy means next to nothing to me. There are some things you can't fudge. JFK bought it on November 22nd, 1963 in Dallas. The Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. Beyond the broad facts of history shit, I just extrapolate and go wild. One of the great finds of looking through research briefs for Perfidia, the novel that precedes this storm here, was my realization that the early reporting of the Japanese internment was hopefully muddled and ambiguously defined, which gave me enhanced latitude to fictionalize. I let myself go nuts. I never believed for a second that Fred Otash had the inside skinny on the JFK hit, the RFK hit, or Marilyn Monroe's drug OD. Robert Kennedy, parenthetically, did not have an affair with Marilyn Monroe. Bobby Kennedy was, with one minor glitch, faithful to his wife, Ethel. And to say that Jack Kennedy, who I refer to disparagingly as Bad Back Jack in American tabloid, hardly had an affair or a love relationship with Marilyn Monroe. They met at the pad of a film producer named Charles Feldman in 1954. They probably saw each other for an hour at a pop 7 or 8 times. That included those 1-hour intervals, those trysts, the some conversation, and Jack's postcoital scotch and club sandwich. Nobody killed Marilyn Monroe. She was a barbiturate addict and a stone juice head. And after having exploited the JFK assassination in American tabloid, I would have to say that I am beyond verisimilitude now, beyond exploiting history, and I subscribe to the lone gunman theory. And if you doubt the solvency of that opinion, read my good friend Tom Mallon's nonfiction book about the JFK job, Mrs. Payne's Garage.
20 years from now, would you recommend that my grandson read your books in chronological order, the way you're going back and forth? Should he start with this quartet? And if so, when should he read your memoir about your mother's murder?
My memoir, My Dark Places, which is the story of my mother's unsolved murder in 1958, can be read at any point. It's not the work of art, frankly, that the fiction is. I'm a novelist at my core. I've written 2 full-length memoirs and essays and crime reporting and general journalism, but it's not the same. So, yeah, 20 years hence, when I'm a fit and spry 91, which is a sobering thought, read the books in chronological order. And you might want to also go on to my master plan and its culmination, the second Underworld USA trilogy. I'm writing as fast as I can. I'd be home writing now if I wasn't here talking to you. So buy your 3,000 each and get the hell out of here.
Do you see yourself writing about the Manson era, or like the Doors, etc.? No, you're not.
No, I hate rock and roll for one thing. It's just kid shit. I've never liked it. I didn't like it in '63. I didn't like it when Elvis Presley came around in '56. What I liked about the 1960s, what I liked was the hippie girls with their hair parted in the middle, very straight hair, combed down the side of their face. And I liked the tight sweater, blue jean, brown boot look that they often evinced. Beyond that, I don't care. I don't give a rat's ass about Manson, the Doors, the Grateful Dead, the Rolling Stones, the Electric Dog Turd, the psychedelic cat box, or any of that rebop and jive. My advice to all rock and rollers, especially elderly rock and rollers, or near elderly people from my generation that are still talking about the Red Hot Chili Peppers, the Bad Buffalo Buttfuckers, and numerous other groups of that ilk, is grow up, quit dressing in black exclusively, quit rebelling against your mom and dad.
How do you research your books? I mean, do you go through reading other people's books, reading newspaper articles, FOIA things, or how do you do that?
I hire researchers, and they're generally the assistant that I have in my employ at the time. They compile fact sheets and chronologies so that I won't write myself into egregious error. What I'm looking for is the extrapolative spark point. I can look through 25 pages of research briefs, and I can pluck 3 things and very happily can the rest of the stuff. I'm out to rewrite history to my own specification. I'm out to create verisimilitude at the expense of hard truth. Beyond that, I've seen a lot of period movies. I've been around this planet for 71 years. I got the twin influences of my life in my head at all times. 1, the Lutheran Church. 2, Confidential magazine. They're creating tension all the time. So I got the moral vision, and I've got over here the sin going full blast. And F. Scott Fitzgerald once wrote that the definition of an artist is a person who can hold concurrently 2 diametrically opposed points of view and retain their sanity. And that's me in a nutshell. Research puts me to sleep.
So, what kind of music do you like? I'm trying to guess, and I can't guess.
I love classical music obsessively, and I like jazz quite a bit. Yeah.
I seem to remember a while ago that I read that you were working on a project about Huey Long. And I was wondering if that was true, or if it was, whatever happened to that project.
There's no Huey Long book. I considered it for a while, novel, The Kingfish. And I considered doing a book about Warren Harding's presidency, 1920 until Harding's death in 1923. I shit-canned all that when I had that synaptic flash that I described about the Second L.A. Quartet. I saw it immediately as the means to unify my career as a historical novelist and frame my city, L.A., my country, America, over the course of 31 years in 11 novels.
A long time ago, I read My Dark Places, and I thought it was really moving. I mean, very memorable. And I have probably a dumb question, but you know, the swarthy man was dancing with your mom the night before.
Yeah.
Anything ever happen with that?
No, it never did. And this man refers to my book, My Dark Places. It's my autobiography, my mother's biography, the biography of a brilliant retired LA Sheriff's homicide detective named Bill Stoner, and it's the account of my arc of reconciliation with my mother in the course of conducting a 15-month reinvestigation into her murder. No, there are no clues, there are no leads, we're never gonna know. It's okay, it's a long time ago. The crime itself, at the time I reinvestigated it, was 36 years old. Obscure murder case, June 1958, over and out. And thank you for your comment about the book.
Sorry to come back to Otash, but
But you're obsessed, right?
the shakedown, Otash-centric, right? I just wondered whatever happened with that. I mean, I understand that was going to be something with FX, or I was just curious about how that turned out and your thoughts
I wrote a
about that.
novella called Shakedown, which is Fred Otash in hell, taking the poker, you know where, as a consequence of his numerous, usurious, altogether shitty misdeeds during his years as a crooked private eye and scandal rag provocateur. I also got a TV deal to write an Otash TV series set in 1953. And as you know, money is the gift that no one ever returns. And I raked in a couple of paychecks on the Otash job, and then it all went away.
Would you share with us some of the books and writers you have enjoyed over the years and would recommend?
There's 3 books that have changed my life. They were written by mainstream novelists accomplished ones, and they explicate real-life historical crimes. And they have had about them the patina of mainstream literature from the gate, chronologically working up. 1956, Meyer Levin's novel Compulsion, about the Leopold Loeb killing, Chicago in 1924. It's a period novel within a period novel. 1956, psychoanalysis, very, very much in vogue. A high water mark of that obsession in the American psyche. A great novel, a great portrait of affluent Jewish American life in Chicago in the Roaring '20s, and a great portrait of two vile killers and the horrible crime that they perpetrated. That's number one. Number two, 1977, True Confessions by John Gregory Dunn, and the late Mr. Dunn, rest in peace, was married to the marvelous writer still with us, Joan Didion. True Confessions is the first major fictional assault on the Black Dahlia murder case. But it's a very fanciful depiction of L.A. after World War II. It's Irish Catholic Boston, or so I thought when I read the book, transposed to Los Angeles. In reality, I've been informed it was not meant to be Irish Catholic Boston. It was Hartford, Connecticut, which was the late Mr. Dunn's hometown. I'm not Irish. I'm not Catholic. It's a flawed book. It weighs too heavy on the Catholicism, but it's a story of two brothers, a priest and a homicide detective, and their interlocking destinies as they pursue the ghost, not of the real life Elizabeth Short, the real life Black Dahlia, as in my book, but someone that Mr. Dunn calls the Virgin Tramp. It is also a milestone in my writer's education. My wild, invective-laced, hilarious prose full of Yiddish, alliteration, black hepcat, jazz patois was very much influenced by True Confessions. Thirdly, lastly, most importantly, Libra, 1988, Don DeLillo's novel of the JFK hit. Wow, turned my life around and inspired my Underworld USA trilogy. I had never been an assassination-ophile. I was 15 when Jack the K was killed. Never paid it much attention. But Mr. DeLillo's thesis that it was a conspiracy enacted by renegade CIA men, not the CIA as an entity, crazy Cuban exiles, and mobsters pissed off that Jack betrayed them at the Bay of Pigs invasion, and of course they wanted to get their casino revenues back, the casinos that the Beard, Fidel Castro, nationalized when he took over in '59. It was the only plausible thesis for the crime if a writer wanted to posit conspiracy. And in the wake of reading Libra, I looked out at all of the Kennedy assassination books, and I saw that Mr. DeLillo's thesis was the only plausible one. Do I believe it today? No, I don't. But I credit Mr. DeLillo every chance I get for attribution for giving me the ideas that entirely diverged and run inimical to his book, but without his book, Libra, by the way, was Lee Harvey Oswald's astrological sign. Without that book, I never would have written three of my very best novels.
Hopefully I can find redemption here. Could you talk a little bit about your writing process?
How so? How I put these books together? The outline for this storm is 465 pages. That is everything, all 134 chapters laid out in minute detail. It's a narrative outline. I skimp on nothing. There's no abbreviations. It's the whole thing laid out. It's a giant superstructure from which I do not diverge. Having this in place and typed up, since I write by hand, big stack of pages, yay high, tells me one thing, especially after my two editors at Alfred A. Knopf, my American publisher, have gone over it with a fine-tooth comb, that the story is dramatically inviolate, that the police investigations are dramatically inviolate, that the character arcs are dramatically inviolate. Having that in place, parenthetically, allows me to live improvisationally within the individual scenes as long as I do not diverge from the outline. This is 10 or 11 months. It's generally conceded now that my books are the most complex crime novels ever written, that I have succeeded in merging successfully the crime novel, the historical novel, and the political novel, and nobody else writes outlines like this. That's it. It's the outline. Having the outline there, man, I sit down, all right, chapter 1, bam. I look over at it, bam. I got to exposit this. Then the inspiration comes to me as to how to densify the scene. You know, I know that there's information that has to be exposited. Yeah, but where's the laugh in this particular scene? All of my books are written either in the first person, one person's perspective, or third person subjective. We're always in somebody's head. That's what gives the books their immediacy. And I plot, I plan, I am deliberate in everything that I do in my creative life and my personal life as well. A final question that I will pose to you. Does anybody want to ask, why do you write? Again. Why do you write? Yeah! In my craft or sullen art, exercised in the still night, when only the moon rages and the lovers lie abed, with all their griefs in their arms, I labor by singing light, not for the strut and trade of charms upon the ivory stages, but for the common wages of their most secret heart. Not for the proud man apart do I write on these spindrift pages, but for the lovers, their arms round the griefs of the ages, who pay no praise or wages, nor heed my craft or art. Dylan Thomas. God bless you. Thank you for coming.